The highway had no name this far out. It was just a two-lane strip of cracked asphalt cutting through wheat country, the kind of road that did not show up on phone maps anymore, the kind that existed mostly in the memory of the people who still used it. Rex Carver had been riding it for 6 hours straight. His back ached where the old shrapnel scar pulled tight in cold air. His hands inside the gloves had gone numb somewhere past the Montana border and never quite warmed back up. He did not stop for that. He had stopped stopping for things like that a long time ago. The Harley was a 2009 Road King Black, over black, no chrome, except the exhaust pipes and the tank badge. It was not a beautiful machine. It was a working machine. There was a crack in the left saddlebag from the time he had laid the bike down outside Flagstaff in 2019, and he had patched it with electrical tape and never replaced the bag because the tape held. The seat was worn down on the left side where his weight always settled. The handlebars had been adjusted so many times for so many different road positions that the bracket threads were stripped, and he had fixed that with a bolt from a hardware store in Reading and a prayer. He rode and the land moved around him. Flat first, then rolling, then the first dark shapes of hills rising on the western horizon like a promise of something different. He had left Oakland 3 weeks ago. He had not called anyone since Medford. He had $600 in his wallet, a sleeping bag rolled behind the sissy bar, a change of clothes and a shaving kit in the right saddlebag, and in the left wrapped in an oilcloth his grandfather's folding knife, and a photograph of a farm in Northern California that no longer existed. He was 53 years old. He had 2 tours of Iraq behind him, 14 years with the Hells Angels Oakland chapter behind him, and a mother buried in Fresno who had never once asked him to explain himself and whom he had loved without reservation for his entire life. She had died in March. He had ridden north the day after the funeral with no destination in mind. That had been the plan. No plan was the plan. He crossed into Cutler County just past noon. There was a sign at the county line, one of the old green ones with white letters, the kind that listed the county name and the population number underneath. The population number had been painted over at some point and never updated. Below it in smaller letters, Bishop's Hollow, 14 miles. Rex did not need anything in Bishop's Hollow. He needed gas somewhere before nightfall, and maybe a diner if there was one. He had no opinion about the town. He had no history with it. He just needed to pass through it on his way to wherever he was going, which was a question he had stopped asking himself because the asking had started to feel like pressure, and pressure was the thing he was riding away from. He did not get to Bishop's Hollow. The lights came on behind him 4 miles past the county sign. Red and blue strobing in his mirrors, a county cruiser sitting low on worn shocks pulling out from behind a grain elevator that had been screened by a stand of cottonwood. Rex felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the old reflex, and he let it pass through him without holding on to it. He signaled. He pulled to the shoulder. He cut the engine. He put both hands on the handlebars and kept them there. The cruiser sat behind him for a full 90 seconds before the door opened. Rex watched in his left mirror. The man who got out was broad somewhere in his early 50s, a tan uniform with a silver badge catching the afternoon sun. He had a lawman's walk, slow and deliberate, the walk of a man who was not in a hurry, because being in a hurry would imply something could surprise him. His hand rested on the holster at his right hip, not gripping it, just resting. He came up on the left side of the bike and stopped. "License and registration," he said. Rex reached slowly into his jacket 2 fingers and produced the documents. The officer took them without looking at them. He looked at Rex instead. His eyes moved across the jacket, across the patch on the back that Rex could not see, but that the officer obviously could, across the tattoos on Rex's hands up to his face. "Where you headed?" "North," Rex said. "North is a big place." "Yes, sir." "You got family up this way?" "No, sir." The officer turned the license over in his hand. Rex Carver, Oakland, California. He said it the way men say the names of places they have already decided they do not like. "You are a long way from home, Mr. Carver." "I am aware of that." A pause. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. A red-tailed hawk lifted off a fence post 50 yards down the road and banked south. "We have had some incidents in this county lately," the officer said. "Vandalism, some threats. We take a particular interest in strangers coming through, especially the kind that ride in colors." He folded the license and registration together and held them in one hand. "I'm going to need you to give me your phone." Rex looked at him. "My phone?" "Temporarily. While I run you through the system, procedure. It was not procedure. Rex knew what procedure looked like, and this was not it. But he also knew what the inside of a Cutler County holding cell would look like. And he knew what it would cost him to start trouble on a two-lane road 4 miles from nowhere, with no backup and no witnesses. He took the phone from his jacket pocket and held it out. The officer took it. He walked back to the cruiser. He sat inside for 11 minutes. Rex watched the clock on nothing because he had no phone to watch it on, and so he counted in his head, which he had learned to do in Fallujah, where counting was a way of keeping time when time had become a thing you were not sure you had any more of. He came back. He handed Rex the license and the registration. He handed him the phone. "You are clear," he said. "No outstanding warrants, no flags." A pause. "I would encourage you to pass through Bishop's Hollow without stopping, Mr. Carver. Get your gas at the Shell station on the east end of town, pay at the pump, and keep moving north. This county is not much for visitors." "I will keep that in mind," Rex said. The officer looked at him for another moment. His eyes were flat and without curiosity, the eyes of a man who had already made all his decisions about the world and was just waiting for the world to confirm them. "Sheriff Cobb," he said, and Rex realized he was introducing himself rather than making conversation. "You remember that name?" He walked back to the cruiser and drove away. Rex sat on the shoulder of the road for a long time after the dust settled. He looked at the hawk which had come back and was sitting on the fence post again, watching him with the focused patience of a thing that hunted for a living. Rex understood that. He took out his phone and looked at it. The screen had a partial print on it from the officer's thumb. He wiped it on his jeans. He kicked the bike to life. He did not head for the Shell station on the east end of Bishop's Hollow. He rode west. The road that ran west out of the main highway was not marked on the green sign. It was a county road, one of those numbered routes that only locals knew by number, and everyone else called by what was at the end of it. Rex found it because he was looking. He had been looking since the sheriff pulled him over, taking in the landscape the way he had been trained to take in landscapes, reading the ground for what it told you. What it told him was that there were farms out here, old ones, the kind with windbreaks of cottonwood and pine planted a generation ago, the kind with grain bins that had seen better decades, the kind with mailboxes sitting crooked at the end of long gravel drives because no one had straightened them since the posts rotted. He had grown up with farms like this. He knew what they looked like when they were healthy, and he knew what they looked like when something was wrong. Something was wrong here. He could see it in the way the fences ran with gaps that no working farmer would tolerate. He could see it in the way two of the farmsteads he passed had lights only in one or two windows, the minimal habitation of people hunkered down. He could see it in the driveway of the third place he passed, which had fresh tire tracks going in and out that were too wide to be a farm truck. The kind of wide that said commercial vehicle, the kind that came for business purposes, a farmer had not invited. He found the Briggs place at the end of a gravel road that wound through a stand of old-growth cottonwood before opening onto 40-odd acres of pasture and hayfield. The house was white once now, weathered to the color of old bone, 2 stories with a porch that wrapped around the front and the south side. There was a barn red with one section of roof that looked new against the older gray shingles on the rest of it. A chicken coop, a smokehouse with a hole punched through its side wall, the wood around the hole darker than the rest from weather no one had kept out. On the side of the barn, someone had spray painted a single word in black. Sell. Rex stopped the bike at the gate. The gate was a cattle gate on a rolling wheel and someone had been at the hinges with a crowbar. The repair was recent but incomplete, the post cracked through and the gate hanging at a slight angle. He sat on the idling bike and looked at the yard. A light was on in the kitchen. A curtain moved. He cut the engine. He put the kickstand down. He walked to the gate and put his hand on it and waited. The front door of the house opened. A woman came onto the porch. She was in her mid-70s, small frame but upright, wearing a house dress and a cardigan over it. Her hair was white and pulled back. Her hand shook slightly as she raised the shotgun to her shoulder. Behind her, a man appeared in the doorway. He was taller, or had been once. He walked with a cane, his left hip dropped lower than his right with each step. He was about the same age as the woman. He stopped just behind her right shoulder. Rex raised both hands slow. He did not speak. He let them look at him. "This is private property," the woman said. Her voice did not shake the way her hands did. "Yes, ma'am," Rex said. "I can see that. You work for Donovan." The name meant nothing to him yet. No, ma'am, I do not work for anyone. I am just a man on a road. We do not want whatever you are selling. I am not selling anything. He kept his hands where they were. He looked past her at the man with the cane, who was studying him with an expression Rex could not immediately read. Not fear, something that lived on the other side of fear, where fear had been present so long, it had worn a groove in you and settled in there permanently, and you had stopped calling it fear because it was just the weather now. I will leave if you want me to leave, Rex said. I will back up, turn the bike around, and ride out the way I came. You will never see me again. That is one option. The woman did not lower the gun. What is the other option? Rex looked at the yard, at the busted gate, at the spray-painted word on the barn, at the smokehouse with the hole in its side. The other option is you let me fix that gate, he said, and we talk about what has been happening here. A long pause. The chickens made noise somewhere behind the coop. A breeze moved through the pasture grass. The man with the cane made a sound in his throat. He stepped forward and put his hand on the woman's arm very gently. She kept the gun up. Dot, the man said, just her name, nothing else. Dot Briggs looked at Rex Carver for a long time. She looked at his hand still raised. She looked at the road behind him, confirming he was alone. She looked at his face, which was a weathered face, not unkind, a face that had seen things but had not been made mean by them. She lowered the barrel. You eat, she said. Rex lowered his hands. I can eat, he said. Harlan Briggs was 78 years old, a Korea-era veteran, and he had been running this farm through good years and bad ones since his father handed it to him in 1974. His father had handed it to him in the only way farming land gets handed on, which is not through ceremony or announcement, but through the gradual transfer of labor, the older man doing less and the younger man doing more. Until one day the older man is gone, and the younger man realizes he has been running it alone for years already. Harlan's father had been a hard man in the way men of that generation were hard, not cruel, but shaped by a world that did not reward softness. He had worked land that did not want to be worked in a climate that did not cooperate. He had raised a son and buried a wife and kept going because the going was what there was. Harlan had inherited that quality the way you inherit the shape of a tree or the set of a shoulder without asking for it, without always understanding it until you look in a mirror one morning and recognize what you are carrying. He walked with a cane now because his left hip had been replaced 3 years ago, and the replacement had not taken the way the surgeon said it would. He was in pain most days. He did not discuss this. Dot was 75. She had been a registered nurse for 31 years at the county hospital before they closed the county hospital and sent the work to the regional center 40 miles east. She had retired at 68, not because she wanted to, but because the knees had told her she was done, and she had listened. Her hands shook now from essential tremor, which was not serious, which was not degenerative, which was just a thing that happened to some people and which she had decided not to be upset about. They had no children. They had tried. That was a door that had been closed and locked, and they had each separately and together made peace with it in their own time, in their own way. They had a nephew in Spokane who called at Christmas sometimes. They had each other, and they had the farm, and for 53 years that had been enough, and then some. Rex sat at the kitchen table and ate 2 bowls of beef stew that Dot had made that afternoon, and he drank black coffee from a chipped mug, and he answered their questions in short sentences because he was not a man who talked at length about himself by default. Where was he from? Northern California, originally Oakland, most recently. Was he heading anywhere specific? Not particularly. Did he have family? Not anymore. A brother who had died in Ramadi in 2006. A mother who had died in March. He watched them receive that last piece. Dot's expression shifted in the way it shifts for people who understand loss at a cellular level, who have absorbed enough of it that it no longer makes them flinch, but instead makes them go very still and very present with whoever is carrying it. I am sorry, she said. She was 71, Rex said. She was ready. She told me so. He looked at his coffee. I was not ready, but that is not her problem. Harlan cleared his throat. He had been watching Rex with a steady, unreadable expression since the porch. That a road king out there? Yes, sir. What year? '09. You do the motor work yourself. Some of it. A man I know in Oakland did the cylinders. Harlan nodded the way men nod when they are thinking about something they miss. I had a Triumph Bonneville in 1968. Best summer of my life. I sold it when Dot and I got married because she would not ride pillion, and I did not blame her. He glanced at Dot. I still think about that bike. You think about it every single week, Dot said. You have been thinking about it for 53 years. It was a good bike. It was, she said, and the way she said it told Rex that this was a conversation they had performed so many times it had become a kind of ceremony. A call and response that meant something to both of them, precisely because it was repeated and precisely because both of them knew what it meant. After supper, Rex walked out to the barn without asking. He climbed to the loft and unrolled his sleeping bag on a pile of hay and lay on his back in the dark and listened to the farm settle around him, the creak of old timber, the sound of a cow shifting in her stall below the wind in the eaves. He took off his jacket and folded it beside his pack. The patch on the back was face up in the dark. He could not see it, but he knew what it said. 14 years of his life, a code of loyalty that was absolute and a code of conduct that was complicated. He had not left. He had asked for time. There was a difference, and the difference mattered. He lay in the dark and thought about the word on the barn, sell. One word in black paint by someone who had come onto private property in the night and made a demand without asking. He had seen that word before, or versions of it. He had seen the logic behind it before too. Someone wanted something and the person who had it did not want to give it, and the someone had moved from asking to threatening, and the threatening had started small and was building towards something he already knew the shape of. He went to sleep with the jacket beside him and the sound of the wind in the eaves and did not dream. He was up before dawn. The pump in the yard was cold, and he washed his face and hands with the cold water and dried them on his jeans. He found a hammer and a coffee can full of nails on the porch railing, put there by someone who had meant to use them and then had not had the physical capacity to follow through. He fixed the gate in 40 minutes. Then he found a spool of chicken wire in the barn and patched the section of coop fencing that had rusted through. Then he carried 3 bales of hay from the loft to the ground floor because the baling hook on the loft pulley was broken and Harlan could not manage the stairs anymore. He was splitting wood in the yard when Dot came out with a cup of coffee and set it on the porch railing and stood there watching him with her arms folded. You have done farm work before, she said. Grew up on a farm in Shasta County, sheep mostly, some cattle. My grandfather ran it. What happened to it? He died. Bank took it. She was quiet for a moment. I am sorry. I was 19. I joined the Marines the next week. He set another log on the chopping block. Did not have anything else to do with myself. Dot studied him. You can stay in the barn as long as you need, she said finally. I appreciate that. Rex, he looked at her. My husband and I are old. We are not helpless. But we are old, and there are men in this county who have been making our lives difficult for the better part of a year. I want you to understand that before you decide to stay, because if you stay and they see you here, it will become their business. And I do not want to put that on a stranger. He looked at the gate he had fixed, at the barn with the spray-painted word, at the smokehouse with its battered wall. How long has this been going on, he said. 10 months. And before that, this was just a farm. She paused. A man named Wade Donovan came out last October. He runs a development company out of Spokane, big operation resort hotels, planned communities. He sat in my kitchen and drank my coffee and told us he wanted to buy the farm. He had an offer ready. We said no. He smiled and said he understood and he hoped we would reconsider. And then about 3 weeks later, the gate got broken. And you called the sheriff. We called the sheriff. She let a breath out through her nose. Sheriff Cobb is Wade Donovan's first cousin. You met Cobb on the road this morning, did you not? Rex looked at her. You saw that. I saw his cruiser on the shoulder from the upstairs window when I got up for water. I saw him pull you over. Rex thought about the flat eyes. The name offered like a warning. Yes, ma'am, I did. She nodded. Then you know something about how things work in this county. He did. I would like to stay a few more days, he said, if that is all right. It is all right, she said. She went inside. He finished splitting the wood. The days that followed were made of work. Rex was not a man who was comfortable with stillness under normal circumstances, and these were not normal circumstances. And so he worked from first light until the light was gone, and he used the work the way he always used it, as a form of thinking that did not require words. He re-roofed the east section of the barn with shingles he found stacked behind the smokehouse. He rebuilt the smokehouse wall from the inside cutting boards from a pile of rough lumber in the back of the equipment shed and fitting them over the hole with 8-penny nails in a speed square. He took the one cow, an aging Holstein named Patience, whom Dot had named herself, because the animal had earned it through 3 hard years. He took Patience to the vet in Bishop's Hollow because she was dropping her milk poorly, and Harlan rode with him in the truck, and on the way Harlan talked about the farm, the way men talk about the things they have given their lives to, with a mix of pride and grief and a kind of love that has no other word for it. The farm had been in the family since 1931. Harlan's grandfather had broken this ground. His father had taken it through the hard years and handed it to Harlan in 1974. 43 acres of pasture and hayfield water rights on 2 creeks that ran down from the hills to the north. The kind of water rights that had been negotiated and documented in the 1940s and were still valid. Harlan had never thought much about the water rights, except as something that came with the farm, a background thing, a given. "What does Donovan want with it?" Rex asked. Harlan looked out this truck window. "He wants to put up a resort community, 40-some units on a man-made pond. He is already building on the neighboring parcels. He got the Mosby place and the Hanson place and the Keller property in the last 2 years. What did he pay? A fraction. The Mosbys got $120,000 for property worth $500,000. The Hansons got even less." He paused. "I believe he had help convincing them." "What kind of help?" Harlan looked at him. "The kind with a badge." Rex drove and thought about that. "He offered us $200,000, Harlan said. "The farm is worth pushing $900,000 if you price it right. The water rights alone are worth $400,000, but that is not the point." "What is the point?" Harlan's hands settled on his cane. He looked at them for a moment, the old scarred hands of a man who had worked ground for 50 years. "My grandfather came to this valley with $30 in a team of draft horses and a wife who was 6 months pregnant and no place to be. He broke ground in November, which is the wrong time to break ground, and he built a shelter out of what he could cut from the timber on the North Hill, and they lived in that shelter through the winter. The baby came in January. Lived. My grandfather lived to see grandchildren. The $30 lasted 9 months, and then it was gone, and after that they lived on what the ground gave them." He stopped. He looked out the window at the passing fields. "That ground, this ground, I was born in the bedroom upstairs. Every memory I have is here. There is no number he can write on a check that buys what is not for sale." Rex nodded and drove. He understood that. He understood it the way you understand a thing that matches something in your own experience, a thing that does not need explanation because it lands in a place you already know, a place that was formed by someone else's hands and passed down to you without ceremony. They got Patience back to the farm by late afternoon. Harlan fed her himself, moving slowly with the cane, murmuring to the cow in the low voice of a man talking to something he has cared for so long that the caring has become a language of its own. Rex was repairing the water trough fitting in the barn when he found the box. He had pulled the wooden panel off the lower wall of the trough housing to get at the fitting, and behind the panel, set into a hollow in the stone foundation, was a metal box about the size of a shoebox. It was an old ammo box, military surplus olive drab, with a hasp closure and a small padlock that had rusted completely through. Rex sat back on his heels and looked at it. He lifted it out. It was lighter than he expected. He set it on the barn floor and turned it over in his hands. The metal was cold and slightly damp from the stone. On the lid, scratched into the paint with something sharp, were 3 lines of text cut deep. "For whoever stays after us, do not open until we are gone. H.B. 1983. Rex sat very still with the box in his hands. H.B. Harlan Briggs. The farm had come to Harlan in 1974. The box was dated 1983, which meant a younger Harlan, already the one whose name was on the deed, had put this here himself, or Harlan's father had put it here after the handover. Either way, someone had prepared for a future they could not see in the way of people who understand that preparation is one of the few acts of love that survives the lover. Rex replaced the panel. He carried the box up to the loft and set it beside his sleeping bag. He looked at it for a long time in the failing afternoon light. He did not open it. Not yet. Some things wanted to be announced in their proper time, and this was not the time. He went back down and finished the water trough fitting and fed Patience and came in for supper and said nothing about the box. The men came on a Tuesday. Rex had been on the farm 9 days. He was running fence wire along the road when the black crew cab pickup slowed and pulled onto the shoulder 20 yards behind him. He did not look up right away. He finished the section he was on and set the fencing pliers down and only then turned. Two men. The driver was heavy through the shoulders with a sunburned neck and a ball cap pulled low. The passenger was younger, sharp-featured, with a smile that moved only the lower half of his face. Both wore work boots. Both had the look of men who did physical work, but not the kind that involved producing anything. The driver leaned out his window. "You the hired help?" "Helping out," Rex said. "This is the Briggs place." "Yes. We've been by before." Talked to the old man. He was not too receptive. Mr. Donovan wanted us to stop by again. See if old Harlan had come around. "I do not speak for Harlan," Rex said. "His business is his." The passenger climbed out. He came around the front of the truck and walked toward Rex with his hands loose at his sides, his weight easy on his feet, the way the weight of men who think they can fight is easy. He stopped 6 feet away. "Who are you?" he said. "Rex." "Rex what?" "Just Rex." The man looked at him the way men look when they are doing a calculation and the answer is coming up in their favor. He looked at the jacket. He looked at the tattoos on the backs of Rex's hands. He did not see the patch. The patch was facing away from him. "You ought to tell your old couple that Mr. Donovan is a patient man," the passenger said. "But patient has limits. They should think about that." Rex looked at him without expression. "I will tell them you stopped by," he said. The passenger stood there for another moment. Then he got back in the truck and they drove away. Rex stood by the fence until the dust settled. The hawk was back on its post. It watched him with its gold-ringed eye. He picked up the fencing pliers and went back to work. That evening he ate his supper and said nothing about the men until Harlan brought it up, which Harlan did quietly after the plates were cleared. "They came by today," Harlan said. "Yes." Dot sat very still with her hands around her coffee cup. "It has been escalating," Harlan said. "First the offer, then the gate, then the smokehouse wall. 3 weeks ago they drove through the hayfield with a truck and cut ruts in it. 2 weeks ago someone killed a chicken." He paused. "Sheriff Cobb comes out when we call. He takes our statement. Nothing happens." Rex set his cup down. "Who else is left on this road?" Harlan looked at him. "You said Donovan bought the Mosby place, the Hanson place, the Keller property. Are there others between here and the highway?" "There is Nora Hanson," Dot said quietly. "She sold, but she still lives on the place. Donovan let her stay in the house. She has 68 lives alone. I think she regrets it." A pause. "I think she regrets it a great deal." Rex looked at the table. He thought about what the two men had come for today and what the next visit would look like, and the one after that. "I need to make a call," he said. "I would like to do it from the barn, if that is all right." "Of course," Dot said. He went out to the barn. He climbed to the loft and sat on his sleeping bag with the ammo box beside him and took out his phone and looked at the name in his contacts for a while before he pressed it. It rang 4 times. "Brother," said the voice on the other end. Low, rough, the voice of a man who had been smoking too much and sleeping too little for 30 years without apology. "Slade," Rex said. "How are you?" "I'm all right. I'm in Idaho." "Idaho." A pause. "Doing what in Idaho?" "Helping some people. Old couple. Retired Korea vet and his wife. They have got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that needs more than I can provide on my own." The pause this time was longer. Rex knew what was in it. The calculation, the loyalty, the weight of the ask. "Tell me," Slade said. Rex told him everything. The farm and its history, Donovan and the pattern of acquisition, the sheriff who was Donovan's first cousin, the 4 neighboring farms sold under pressure in 2 years, the escalating threats, the word painted on the barn. Slade listened without interrupting the way he always listened when something mattered. When Rex finished, Slade said, "What are you asking for?" "I'm asking you to know about it and to be ready." "How many has Donovan got working for him?" 6 or 7 that Harlan knows about. 2 of them are Bikers Club out of Spokane. The rest are hired muscle. And the sheriff. A small silence on Slade's end. Something shifted in it. Slade. "Yeah. What is it?" "Donovan's name has come up before," Slade said. "In a business context, our Spokane chapter has done security work for some of his events. Resort openings, contract work, nothing ongoing. But there is a relationship there." Rex was quiet. "That does not change anything," Slade said quickly. "It changes some things. It means you have got brothers who have taken money from the man I am telling you is pressuring an old couple in Idaho. Taken money for legitimate work, not for this." "I know the difference," Rex said. "I am saying the men you would be calling might know the difference less cleanly than you do." Another silence. I will sort that, Slade said finally. You let me worry about who comes and who does not. You focus on what is in front of you. All right. Rex, a pause. You good out there personally? Rex looked at the barn wall, the rough wood, the old nails, some of them bent and hammered flat by hands that were decades dead. I am better than I was, he said. This place does something. I cannot explain it. You do not have to explain it, Slade said. I will be in touch. He hung up. Rex sat with the phone in his hand for a while. Then he put it in his pocket and picked up the ammo box and held it. The scratched letters on the lid caught the last light from the hayloft door. He set it down without opening it. Not yet. The morning after he arrived, before Dot came out with the coffee, Rex walked the perimeter of the farm alone. He did it the way he had walked patrol in Fallujah, methodical, reading the ground, not for threats in the immediate sense, but for information, because information was what you read a place for before you could understand it fully. The south fence needed the most work. Not just the section he had already noted near the road, but the full quarter-mile run along the property's lower boundary, where the posts had heaved in freeze-thaw cycles over what looked like several hard winters. The wire was intact, but sagging between the posts, and sagging wire was an invitation to whatever wanted in. The creek that ran along the north edge of the property was clear in cold snowmelt, still coming down from the hills even in October. It ran between mossy banks, cutting a channel through the pasture that seasonal flooding had widened over decades. Someone had built a rough timber crossing over it at the north gate, just two heavy beams and some planking, and two of the planks had rotted through. He noted that. The equipment shed held a tractor that had not run in 2 seasons by the look of it, an old Ford utility model with a corroded battery terminal and a gunked fuel filter. There was a hay baler with a shear bolt that had gone and not been replaced. There were tools in various states of organization, the tools of a man who had worked all his life and known where everything was until the body stopped cooperating. He stood in the equipment shed and looked at the tractor. A day, maybe 2, it was not complicated machinery. He thought about his grandfather's farm, the way the mornings had smelled their hay and diesel, and the cold fog off the Sacramento Valley that burned off by 9. His grandfather was a man who rose at 4:30 every day of his adult life and worked until dark and then did accounts at the kitchen table until 10 and was in bed by 10:30 and rose again at 4:30. He seemed to operate on something other than rest, something that the farm itself provided the purpose of, it the necessity of it, the fact that if he did not do it, then it did not get done, and if it did not get done, the animals suffered and the animals were his responsibility. Rex had understood that from the time he was 6. Responsibility was not a burden. Responsibility was a thing you had that oriented you in the world. People without it drifted. People with it had a direction. He had had responsibility in the Marines. He had had it in the club. He had had it right up until March when his mother died, and he had stood in the funeral home in Fresno and looked at her face and understood for the first time since his grandfather died that the person who had always been there, always been a fixed point, was gone. And without the fixed point, he had felt himself begin to drift. He had not told anyone about that feeling. He had packed a bag and gotten on the bike and ridden north. Standing in the equipment shed of a farm in Idaho that did not belong to him, looking at a tractor he had not been asked to fix, he understood that the drifting had stopped. He did not know yet what that meant or how long it would last. He only knew that it had stopped. He went back to the barn. He found the tools he needed and carried them to the yard. He was sharpening a post hole digger when the porch door opened and Dot came out with the coffee. She set the cup on the railing and looked at him with the expression of a woman who had been reading people for 75 years and had gotten very good at it. You were up early, she said. Habit, military. Marine habit first, other things after. She leaned on the railing with her own cup in her hands. The morning light was coming in low over the east pasture, turning the frost on the grass pale gold. A red-tailed hawk was making lazy circles over the hayfield. Harlan slept better last night than he has in months, she said. He does not sleep well when he is worried. He would never tell you that, but I know. I hear him. She looked at the hawk. He was snoring by 9. That is good. He has a way of pretending things are not as serious as they are, Dot said. For my benefit, he thinks, as if I do not have eyes. She paused. The men who have been coming, the threats. He minimizes them when he talks to me about them. He thinks it will keep me from being afraid. Does it? No. She looked at her coffee. I was a nurse for 31 years. I have seen what fear looks like from the inside out. You cannot fool me with minimizing. Rex tested the sharpened digger edge with his thumb. You are not afraid of us, she said. A statement, not a question. No, ma'am. Of what you are, what your club is. He looked at her. I am not doing this for the club. The club is not here. I am here. I am a man who stopped because your gate was broken and your barn had a word on it. He paused. I stopped because I know what that kind of situation leads to if no one stops. Dot nodded slowly. She looked at him the way she had looked at him over the gun barrel that first day, the long level assessment of a woman who was deciding something. We will feed you proper, she said finally, at least while you are here. You do not have to. I know I do not have to, she said in a tone that ended that particular conversation, and she went back inside. Rex drank his coffee and looked at the farm in the morning light and listened to the hawk calling over the hayfield, and for the first time in 7 months, he did not feel the specific quality of emptiness that had been with him since March. He felt instead the beginning of something he did not have a word for yet, and he knew better than to name it before it settled. The second day, Harlan came out to watch. He came on the cane, moving carefully on the porch steps and then across the yard with the deliberate economy of a man who had learned to husband energy. He stopped 20 feet away and watched Rex work on the south fence line, pulling old posts and setting new ones. Rex did not acknowledge him at first. He had learned that men like Harlan, men who had worked all their lives and were now watching someone else work their land, needed a moment before they could receive help without discomfort. You are setting them at 30-inch depth, Harlan said eventually. Frost line is 24 here. I want the extra margin. A pause. You know frost lines. Northern California gets cold enough. Another pause. You are doing it right, Harlan said. Coming from a man like Harlan, those 4 words carried considerable weight. Rex received them without comment and kept working. Harlan came out again the 3rd day and the 4th. By the 5th day, he was sitting on an overturned bucket 3 feet away, and they were talking in the natural rhythm of 2 people working adjacent to each other. Sentences separated by the sound of work ideas that did not need to be completed because the other person already understood where they were going. Harlan talked about the farm the way he would talk about a family member, with the intimate knowledge of someone who had been in daily contact with the subject for 50 years. The south pasture flooded in February almost every year when the snow came off the north hills fast. The hayfield ran better with a nitrogen application in late March. The creek crossing needed rebuilding every 7 or 8 years. Patience the cow was particular about her feed schedule and got anxious if it varied by more than 20 minutes. He talked about Korea. Not the fighting. Men who had been in combat and were also private people did not talk about the fighting with someone they had known for less than a week. He talked about the cold. The specific quality of Korean cold, which was different from Idaho cold, a cold with humidity in it that got into you differently and stayed longer. He talked about Dot, not about her directly, but about what it was like to have been with one person for 53 years, which was its own form of talking about her. You lose your way sometimes, Harlan said one afternoon. After a long time together, you stop seeing each other because you are too close, too much the air you breathe. He was quiet for a moment. And then something happens that reminds you. You remember. He looked at his hands. These past 10 months have been the worst of our lives, and we have seen each other clearer than we have in years, which is not worth it, but it is true. Rex set a post and packed the gravel around it and tamped it down. My grandfather was married to my grandmother for 41 years, he said. She died at 61. He had 19 more years after her. He worked every day of those 19 years and never complained and never fell apart and never talked about her in a way that asked for sympathy. Rex stood and tested the post with both hands. It held. But every Sunday morning he made 2 cups of coffee. Every Sunday for 19 years. Left one on the kitchen table like she was coming to get it. Harlan was quiet for a long time. That is love, Rex said. He was not a man who said that word easily. He said it now because it was the right word and there was no other. Harlan looked at the fence post Rex had said. He looked at his farm. You gonna paint over that? He meant the word on the barn. When you say so. Not yet. Let it stay until this is finished. So we remember what we were up against. Rex nodded. They walked back to the house. The week that followed was ordinary on the surface and not ordinary underneath. Rex drove Dot to the pharmacy in Bishop's Hollow on Wednesday. In the pharmacy, he stood near the back and watched the woman behind the counter, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, who looked at Dot with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had been dealing with the same customer for decades and liked her. In the diner next door, he ate a piece of pie and drank coffee and listened to the room. It was the kind of diner that served as the information exchange for a rural county where the booth conversations were about weather and crop prices and local politics, and whose nephew had come back from wherever he had been. Rex had learned long ago that a man in a diner who ate quietly and did not draw attention could absorb a county's worth of information in an hour. He heard the name Donovan twice, once in reference to the resort project spoken with the careful neutrality of people who had a financial relationship with whoever they were discussing. Once in a lower voice between two men Rex could not see from his booth, one of whom said, "Those Briggs people will not hold out much longer." And the other responded with something Rex could not hear, and the first said, "Cobb will make sure of it." Rex put a $5 tip on a $4 coffee and walked out. That afternoon, he was fixing a drainage channel behind the hayfield when he saw a woman come through the fence line from the neighboring property. She was in her late 60s, thin, wearing a ranch jacket over a flannel shirt, her gray hair in a braid. She walked carefully, watching the uneven ground. When she saw Rex, she stopped. "You are the one staying at the Briggs place," she said. "That is right. I am Nora Hanson." She paused, and the pause held the weight of something. "I sold the Hanson place to Donovan last year." The way she said it was the way people say things they cannot stop saying and cannot start forgiving themselves for. "Ma'am," Rex said. She came through the fence and stood near him. She looked at the drainage channel, then at the hills to the north, then back at Rex. "There is something you should know," she said, "about why Donovan really wants this particular property." Rex set down the shovel. "I had a man come by last month," she said. "A surveyor," he said, "just doing routine work. Donovan had hired him to survey the Hanson property for the development plan. But I watched where he went. He did not survey the property. He went to the north fence line, right where my land borders the Briggs land, and he spent 3 hours at the creek head." Rex looked at the hills. The two creeks that came down from the north ran through the Briggs property first. "I did some asking," Nora said. "Discreet asking through a friend whose son works in agriculture law in Boise." She paused. "There is a consortium, a private agricultural water company. They buy water rights and sell them to large-scale irrigation operations. They have been active in this part of Idaho for 2 years, buying up water rights that come with old homestead deeds, the kind that go back to the 1940s. She looked at Rex steadily. "The kind the Briggs land has." Rex went still inside. "The development project," he said, "the resort community. May be real," Nora said. "Maybe a cover, or both. But the water rights are what he is really after. I think my land was a step toward the Briggs land specifically. The creeks run through the Briggs property first. If you control those water rights, you control the source." Rex looked at the creek, clear water over gray stone. "How much are the water rights worth?" he said. "If someone sold them to this consortium." Nora looked at her hands. "My friend said conservatively the going rate for senior water rights on 2 creek heads in this area would be possibly $3 million. Rex stood very still. "Harlan has no idea," he said. "No, Harlan thinks he is sitting on $900,000 worth of land. He is actually sitting on $4 million of land and water. And Donovan has known it from the beginning. And Donovan has been paying this county $150,000 a year in resort development fees, which goes a long way toward explaining why the local sheriff is cooperative." Rex looked at the hills. He thought about the box in the barn loft. He thought about Harlan's grandfather coming west with $30. He thought about Slade's careful pause on the phone. "Mrs. Hanson," he said. Nora, you should be careful if Donovan thinks you have been talking to anyone about this." "I know," she said. She pulled back the cuff of her ranch jacket. On her forearm, fading now but clear, was a bruise in the shape of a hand. "I think he already does." Rex looked at the bruise. He looked at her face, which was steady in the way of women who have been frightened long enough that steadiness has become a survival mechanism. "When did that happen?" he said. 4 days ago. One of his men. He said it was a reminder to stay quiet." She pulled the cuff back down. "I sold my land for a fifth of its worth because they made me afraid, and I was alone and I did not know what else to do. I have regretted it every morning since." She looked at Rex. "I know what you are. I saw the jacket the first day you got here. I know what club. I know what it means." She paused. "I am asking you anyway. Help them, whatever it takes. Help them keep what is theirs." Rex looked at the creek. I'm already planning on it, he said. She nodded once. She went back through the fence and disappeared into the tree line, and Rex watched her go and thought about the bruise on her forearm and the steadiness of her voice and the years of regret she was carrying as casually as a ranch jacket. He picked up the shovel. He went back to work. That night he climbed to the loft and sat beside the ammo box and thought about what Nora Hansen had told him. He thought about $3 million in water rights that a 78-year-old man and his 75-year-old wife did not know they owned. He thought about the surveyor at the creek head. He thought about Sheriff Cobb and the development fees and the flat eyes and the name offered like a warning on a county road. He put his hand on the ammo box lid. The metal was cold. The letters were rough under his fingers. Not yet. He lay back on the sleeping bag and looked at the barn ceiling. Outside, the night was very quiet. An owl somewhere in the cottonwoods. The soft movement of patience in her stall below. The wind that never entirely stopped in this valley, carrying the smell of hay and creek water, and the beginning of autumn. He had asked to stay and they had almost refused. Now he was here, and the thing he had ridden north to get away from the weight. The involvement, the permanent pull of things that needed doing was present here too, in a different form, in a form that felt, if he was honest with himself, less like a burden and more like a reason to be somewhere. He turned onto his side, he closed his eyes. He thought they do not know what is coming yet. Neither do I entirely. But it is coming, and when it arrives, I need to be ready. He went to sleep. The gunshots came at 2:19 in the morning. Rex had been awake since 2, lying in the loft with his eyes open and his body still not from anxiety, but from the trained alertness of a man whose nervous system had learned over 2 tours in 14 years to register the approach of trouble. The way certain animals register a change in barometric pressure without knowing why, without needing to know why, just the body knowing before the mind does. The first round punched through the south wall of the barn at roughly chest height if a man had been standing there. The second hit the loft crossbeam 6 feet to Rex's left. The third went through the open hayloft door and disappeared into the dark field. Then 3 more in rapid succession spread across the south wall, not clustered, not aimed at anything specific. A pattern, a message written in caliber. Rex had rolled off the sleeping bag before the second round hit. He was against the back wall of the loft with his jacket in hand and his boots on by the third shot. He counted the silence after the 6th, 4 seconds, 8, 12. Then the sound of an engine, a gasoline V8, accelerating away fast on the gravel road. He went down the loft ladder in 3 steps and out the barn door into the yard. The air was cold and smelled of October and spent powder. The porch light came on. Harlan was in the doorway with the shotgun, his weight on the cane, his face set in the hard lines of a man who has been frightened and converted it immediately into anger, because anger is survivable in a way that fear is not. "You hit," Harlan called. "No." Rex crossed the yard. "Anyone in the house?" "Dot is inside. She's all right." His voice was steady, but his hand on the cane was not. "That is the first time they have used guns." "Yes," Rex said. He looked at the road. The dust had already settled. The night was quiet again. "They are escalating. They came by and saw me on the fence line, and they want to know if I can be scared off." "And can you?" "No," Rex said. Dot appeared in the doorway behind Harlan. She had a robe over her nightgown, and her hair was down, which made her look both younger and older, at the same time younger, because it was unguarded, older because it was white and very long. "Come inside," she said. They sat at the kitchen table. Dot put water on for coffee. The clock on the wall said 2:24. Outside, the night pressed in, quiet and close. "I have to tell you something," Rex said. He told them about Nora Hansen. He told them what she had found out about the surveyor and the water consortium and the real value of the water rights attached to the Briggs land. He told it straight without softening it, because they were adults and this was their life and they deserved the unedited version. Dot sat very still with her hands around a cup she had not drunk from. Harlan took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. $4 million, Harlan said. "That is Nora's estimate, her contact's estimate." "The water rights." "Yes." Harlan put his glasses back on. He looked at the table. He was quiet for a long time. "My father documented those rights in 1947, he said finally. He went to Boise himself and registered them properly. He used to say the water is the life of the land. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." He paused. He put a lot of things in writing because he did not trust the future to remember what the present knew. Rex thought about the ammo box in the loft. He did not say anything about it yet. Tonight's business was the gunshots and what came next. They are going to come back, Rex said. Harder next time. They have used property damage and intimidation for 10 months, and it has not worked. They have now used live ammunition. The next step, if we let them set the pace, is something that puts one or both of you in the hospital. Dot's hands tightened on the cup. I'm not letting them set the pace, Rex said. But I need you to trust me on how we respond, and I need a few days. To do what? Dot said. To put things in place. He paused. I told you I have people. Brothers from my chapter. I have already been in contact. But there are complications I need to sort through before I call them in, and I need to be sure the ground is ready before that conversation happens. What complications? Harlan said. Rex looked at him. The club I ride with has done business with Donovan's company in the past. Legitimate work security contracts, nothing dirty. But it means there are men in my circle who have taken Donovan's money. I need to know who is coming before they arrive, and I need to know they are coming clean. Harlan looked at him for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. How long, he said. 3 days, maybe 4. And in those 3 days, if they come back, Rex put his hands on the table palms down. I will be between them and this house. You have my word. Harlan reached across the table and put his hand over Rex's. 3 days, he said, whatever you need. Dot stood and went to the refrigerator and came back with a plate wrapped in plastic. She set it on the table. Cornbread from supper, she said. It is better cold. Rex looked at the plate and then at her. There was nothing to say that was proportionate to the gesture, which was not really about cornbread, and so he said nothing. He just took a piece. He called a lawyer he knew in Boise the next morning, a man named Garrett Flynn, who had done legal work for the Oakland chapter on several occasions, and whom Rex trusted with information. He told Flynn about the water consortium. He told him about the pattern of land acquisition. He gave him the names. Flynn said, give me a week. I do not have a week, Rex said. Give me 3 days, Flynn said. I can do 3 days. He drove to Bishop's Hollow that afternoon without Dot or Harlan, without the context of being their helper. He needed to be a stranger again briefly because strangers could go places that connected people could not. He parked on the main street and walked it end to end. Bishop's Hollow was the kind of American small town that had kept its bones intact while losing some of the flesh. Over the decades, brick storefronts, from the 20s, a grain elevator at the north end, a water tower with the county name painted on it, a few empty storefronts, a diner down to breakfast, and lunch only. He went to the diner, he sat at the counter and listened to the room. At the table in the corner, 3 men were talking about the resort with the careful neutrality of people who had a financial relationship with whoever they were discussing. One of them had a son who worked grounds there now, regular hours and health benefits. None of them talked about the Briggs farm. But at the booth behind Rex, 2 older women were talking in lower voices, and he caught pieces of it without trying. The Mosby children, one of them said, selling that land broke them. And the other, Margaret Mosby told me, she cried every day for a month after. Her grandmother's kitchen curtains were still in the window when they left. Rex drank his coffee and ate his pie. He paid and walked out and stood on the sidewalk and looked at the main street. A town built by people who intended to stay, whose children and grandchildren had mostly stayed, whose great-grandchildren were watching the ground shift under their feet in ways they did not have the language to describe, but felt every morning when they woke up. He went to the hardware store. Del Pierce was there, the owner in his early 70s, a big man gone soft in the middle, who looked at Rex's jacket with immediate recognition and said nothing about it, just nodded. Del Pierce had grown up 2 counties over and had known a man who rode with the Oakland chapter in the 80s. He spoke about this with the careful neutrality of a man establishing context without making a claim about what that context meant. Donovan runs the resort, right? Del said, arranging bolts on a display rack. Good management, good staff, he pays on time. Nobody has a complaint about how he runs the business end. Just how he built it, Rex said. Del was quiet for a moment. Just how he acquired the land for it, which is not the same thing as the business itself, but is also not nothing. He set a bolt in the wrong hole, notice moved it. My family has been in this county for 4 generations. I know every family that's sold in the last 2 years. The Mosbys were my wife's cousin's family. Good people, careful people, people who did not make decisions like that lightly. They did not sell because they wanted to. Rex looked at the display rack. If someone were going to do something about that, if someone were going to need people in this county to be willing to be visible, to be in a place at a specific time, Dell kept arranging bolts. People would need to know the time and place, Dell said. They would, and they would need to know it would matter, that the legal piece was in place, that the people who live here being visible was not just symbolic. You let me know, Dell said. Rex bought a bag of 16-penny nails. He paid cash. He drove back to the farm. That evening, Harlan asked him at the kitchen table after supper about the club. He asked it the way men ask about things they have been thinking about all day but have been waiting for the right moment. The Hells Angels, Harlan said. I know what most people think they are. Most people know the 1%, Rex said. The criminal element. It is real. I will not pretend it is not. There are chapters and individuals who have done things I do not defend. And you, Rex looked at his coffee. I have been in places I am not proud of. I have looked the other way at things I should have looked at directly. I have also ridden 600 miles to sit in a hospital waiting room for a brother who had nowhere else. I have also pulled people out of situations where they needed help and the system that was supposed to help them had decided it had other priorities. He paused. It is not a simple answer. Nothing is, Harlan said. I was in Korea at 19. I have been trying to give simple answers about that for 60 years. The answers are never simple. The experience is real. The complexity is real. The men I was with are real. He looked at Rex. A man is not his organization. He is himself inside his organization, which is a different thing. Rex looked at him. I was United States Army, Harlan said. The Army has done things I do not defend. The men in my unit were the men in my unit. You understand the distinction. Yes, Rex said. Harlan picked up his coffee. I am glad you stopped, he said. Whatever happens, whatever comes next, I am glad you stopped at that gate. Rex did not say anything. He did not need to. On the third night, Harlan's heart trouble began. Rex was in the barn when he heard Dot call his name. Not a shout, not a scream, the particular tone of someone controlling their voice with effort because losing control of it was not an option they would allow themselves. He was at the house in 30 seconds. Harlan was in the kitchen, seated his color wrong, a gray-yellow undertone beneath his normal weathered brown. He was breathing in a way Rex recognized from years of being present at the aftermath of violence, the careful, shallow breathing of a body managing pain. His chest, Dot said. She was standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder, her face completely still in the way of someone who had closed every unnecessary process down and was running on pure clinical function. Since when, Rex said. 20 minutes. He did not tell me for the first 15. She looked at Rex. I need to get him to the hospital in Lewis Fork. I will drive, Rex said. She looked at him. Something passed through her face, a recognition that this was not a fight worth having with time running. All right, she said. Lewis Fork Regional Medical Center was 43 miles east. Rex drove it in 38 minutes on dark roads, which was as fast as it could be driven without becoming another emergency. Dot sat in the back seat with Harlan holding his hand, talking to him in a low, steady voice. Rex watched the road and monitored the tone of her voice without listening to the words the way he used to monitor radios in Fallujah, tuned for changes that would tell him what was happening when he could not see it directly. The tone stayed steady. At the hospital, there was the waiting room, which Rex was not good at. He sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights and counted the tiles in the ceiling, and then stopped counting them because it reminded him too much of waiting rooms he had sat in for other reasons, in other places, and he did not need to be in those places right now. 2 hours later, a doctor came out, a young woman with the composed authority of someone who had made 1,000 announcements of this kind and had learned how to make them without falling apart. Harlan had experienced a cardiac event, she said, not a full infarction, what was sometimes called a warning. The heart was stressed. The damage was manageable. He would need to stay 2 nights. He would need to reduce stress. She looked at Rex and then at Dot, not sure who to address. He is going to be all right, she said, but he needs rest. He needs the stressors in his life to be reduced. He needs, Dot said quietly, for the things causing him stress to stop. She looked at her hands. We are working on that. Rex drove back to the farm alone. Dot stayed at the hospital in a chair beside Harlan's bed, which was where she was going to stay, and there was no point in arguing. He dropped her overnight bag at the desk and drove back through the dark 43 miles and pulled up to the farm and sat in the truck for a long time looking at the house. The porch light was on. Dot had left it on before they left. It made the yard look inhabited, which it was technically just not by either of the people who had built their life here. Rex went into the house. He moved through the kitchen, turned the stove light on low. The kitchen was old but clean, the kind of clean that is the result of decades of habit. Everything in its place out of love for the place. He looked at Harlan's chair at the kitchen table. He looked at the 2 cups hanging on their hooks by the stove. He looked at the window at the dark yard at the barn beyond. Then he went out to the barn. He climbed to the loft. He sat on the sleeping bag. He picked up the ammo box. He held it in both hands for a long time. The metal was cold. The scratched letters were rough under his fingers. He turned it over once. Then he opened it. The padlock had rusted completely through, and the hasp lifted without resistance. Inside the box, nested in a layer of oilcloth that had kept the contents dry for 4 decades, were 3 things. The first was the original land patent, the government document establishing the Briggs family's ownership of the Cutler County land, dated 1931, signed by the county recorder and witnessed. The legal description of the property was precise and complete. The second was a hand-drawn map of the property, detailed and careful, hauling the fence lines, the creek beds, the location of the 2 water sources. Across the map in red ink, someone had marked and annotated the water rights registration, the notation, precise gallons per minute, seasonal flow rates, the legal registration numbers from the 1947 Boise filing. The third was a letter, handwritten on lined paper in a strong, clear hand that had developed a very slight tremble toward the end of the final paragraph. Rex unfolded it and read, "To whoever tends this ground after Harlan and I are gone, the farm will try to tell you everything you need to know about itself if you listen to it, but some things need to be written down because people stop listening when they are afraid, and I want whoever comes after to have this in hand when the listening gets hard. The water is the life of this land. I registered the rights in 1947 in Boise, and the numbers are on the map. Do not let anyone tell you they are not worth keeping. They are worth more than anyone will tell you. Men will want to take them from you someday because men always want to take the things that sustain other men. Do not let them. The land is not an investment. It is not an asset. It is a covenant between the people who work it and the people who came before them and the people who will come after. If you work it faithfully, it will sustain you. I do not know who you are. I do not know how you came to be here. But I trust that you are here because the farm chose you the same way the farm chose me, which was by being something I could not walk away from. Take care of it. H. Briggs, April 1983. Rex folded the letter. He sat in the loft for a long time with the folded letter in his hand and the box open beside him, and the sound of the wind in the eaves and Patience shifting in her stall below, and the night very dark and very quiet around the farm. Then he took out his phone. He called Slade. It rang once. I am ready, Rex said. Bring everyone you trust. And Slade. He paused. Tell me the truth about who is coming and who is not. A brief silence on the other end. Clean house, Slade said. I told the Spokane chapter they had a conflict of interest. 2 of our Oakland brothers who had worked Donovan's events sat themselves out voluntarily. They made the right call. 19 coming. Good men, all of them. 19, Rex said. That enough. Rex thought about the gravel road, the gate, Del Pierce in his hardware store, Frances Decker at the newspaper office she had been running for 22 years. The people in the diner who noticed and said nothing but noticed. Should be, he said. When? Come tomorrow night. Come quiet. I will leave the gate open. He hung up. He put the letter back in the box and closed the box and set it carefully beside the sleeping bag. He lay back and looked at the barn ceiling and thought about what tomorrow would bring. Not with dread, but with the focused calm of a man who has been moving towards something for a long time and has finally arrived at the place where the moving stops and the doing begins. Outside, the wind picked up. The cottonwoods along the north fence moved in it a long sound like water or breath. Rex closed his eyes. He drove to Lewis Fork first thing in the morning to check on Harlan and bring Dot a change of clothes and the thermos of coffee she had forgotten in the rush. Harlan was sitting up in the hospital bed when Rex came in. His color was better, not good, but better. The gray-yellow undertone faded back toward normal. He had the television remote in his hand, but the television was off. He was looking at the window at the flat October sky over the parking lot. Dot was in the chair beside the bed asleep, her head tipped back, her mouth slightly open. Rex set the thermos on the table without waking her. Harlan looked at him. She sleep at all, Rex said low. A few hours. She does not let on when she is tired. Never has. Rex sat down in the other chair. The water rights, Harlan said. Nora's information. Do you want to tell me now or after? Rex looked at him. Now. He told him. He told him about the consortium and the estimated value and the surveyor at the creek head and what Nora's contact in Boise had said. He watched Harlan's face while he told it. Harlan's face did not go through shock or satisfaction or anger. What moved through it was something slower, a man fitting a new piece into a shape he had been looking at for a long time and watching it suddenly clarify. My father always said the water was the life of the land, Harlan said. I know. He said it specifically, not just the fields or the buildings, the water. Harlan was quiet. He put the rights in writing in 1947. He went to Boise himself. I was 3 years old. I do not remember it, but he talked about it when I was growing up. He was very particular about it. Rex looked at his hands. When you are out of here, I want to show you something. In the barn. Harlan looked at him. What is it? Something your father left. I found it in the wall behind the water trough housing. He addressed it to whoever comes after. He paused. I think that is you. I think you are the one who is supposed to open it. Harlan was quiet for a long time. His hands lay still on the hospital blanket. He was a man who thought ahead, he said finally, always preparing for what could not be predicted. He looked at the window. I wish I had known him better. He died when I was 34, and I was so busy running the farm by then that we had not talked the way I would have wanted to. I always thought there was more time. Rex did not say anything. There was nothing to say. You called your people, Harlan said. Yes. They coming tonight. Harlan nodded. He looked at Rex with an expression that had moved past the point of calculation and arrived somewhere simpler. I want to be there. You will be here, the doctor said 2 nights. Rex. Harlan. Rex said it quiet and level. You will be here. Dot will be here. You will both be safe. I need you to trust that and rest. Harlan looked at him. Then something in his face settled, the particular settling of a man who has made a decision and found that the making of it is a relief. All right, he said. Dot stirred. She opened her eyes with immediate alertness. No fog, the eyes of someone who had learned to come back to full function instantly because 31 years of nursing had required it. You brought coffee, she said, and the blue cardigan from the hook in the hall. She looked at the thermos and the folded cardigan on the table. She looked at Rex. Thank you, she said. Rex left them together. He drove back to the farm. The 19 men arrived that evening in 2 groups staggered by 40 minutes to avoid drawing attention on the main road. They came in without headlights on the gravel section, cutting them at the cottonwood stand, which Rex had not told them to do, but which he was not surprised they knew to do. He was at the gate when the first group pulled in, 9 bikes running dark, the sound of them deep and steady in the October night. They killed the engines one by one and the silence came back around them. Slade was on the lead bike. He was 58 years old, built like something that had been compressed over decades into a smaller, denser version of itself, dark-bearded and broad through the shoulders. He wore the Oakland patch. He got off the bike and walked to Rex and embraced him the way brothers embrace one arm, hard brief. He stepped back and looked at Rex in the dark. You look better, Slade said. Then what? Then march. Rex did not have anything to say to that. Slade was probably right. The second group arrived 40 minutes later. 10 more bikes. The yard, which had seemed large in the emptiness of the farm's recent life, was now dense with parked machines and men moving carefully in the dark to avoid knocking anything over. They were quiet. This was the thing civilians never understood, Rex had always thought. The movies made it noise and chaos. The reality was men who had spent years learning when to be loud and when to be something else entirely. When something mattered, they went quiet. They were quiet now. Rex gave them the situation in the same flat language he had used with Slade on the phone. He told them about Donovan and the water rights and the sheriff and the pattern of acquisition. He told them about the gunshots, about Harlan's cardiac event, about Nora Hansen's bruised arm. He told them about Flynn, the lawyer in Boise, and Del Pierce at the hardware store, and Francis Decker, who had been running the Bishop's Hollow weekly paper for 22 years, and who was waiting for documentation she could print. When he was done, Slade said, "What do you need from us tonight?" "Tonight, nothing. They do not know you are here. I want to keep it that way until Donovan makes his move. When he comes, I want him to see what he is up against before he does anything stupid. I want him to have the option to back down. And if he does not take it," said a voice from the back, A man Rex knew from 10 years of riding together, a man called Bishop, who was 6'4" and had hands like the flat ends of shovels. Then we handle what we have to handle, but not first. Bishop nodded. That was enough. They camped in the lower pasture. 3 fire rings of stone they built themselves, food from the saddlebags, quiet voices, and the smell of wood smoke in October. Rex walked the perimeter twice. Then he sat with Slade at the farthest fire, and they talked for a while about nothing important, and then about some things that were. The two who sat themselves out, Rex said, Garcia and Tully. They made the right call, Slade said. Were they pressured? They were told what the situation was and given the choice. Garcia said he felt he had a conflict because he had taken Donovan's money. Tully said the same. They are not wrong. I respect it. Rex nodded. I should call them when this is over. You should, Slade or Rex said. I want to tell you something. I was not trying to go around the club on this. This is not about the patch. It is about 2 old people who are doing nothing wrong and someone trying to take what is theirs. Rex, Slade said, I know all that. I have known you 15 years. He looked at the fire. I came because it was right. That is the whole of it. The night moved into the territory of waiting, which was its own form of work. Rex stayed awake. He sat in the barn loft with the ammo box beside him and thought about everything that was in motion. Flynn had called that afternoon with an update. Bank transfers between Donovan's shell company and an account registered to Cobb's wife's maiden name. A paper trail on the water consortium that led back to Donovan's development company as a silent partner. Copies of the original purchase agreements from the 3 families with the coercion documented through communications Flynn had obtained through channels he did not name. It is enough for the state attorney's office, Flynn said. I have already sent a package. This will not stop him today. It will stop him eventually, but the legal process takes time. I know, Rex said. That is why I need the rest of it in place first. He had called Frances Decker. She was ready to run the story the moment something happened that gave her a news hook. He had called Del Pierce. He had said tomorrow night this address. Del had said, how many you think? Rex had said, I do not know. Whoever feels they need to. Now he sat in the loft with the letter from the box folded in his shirt pocket and listened to the farm breathe around him and waited for morning. The call came at 9 the next night from Whitfield, a man he had posted in the cottonwood stand with a sight line to the main road. 3 trucks coming your way, Whitfield said. Donovan is in the lead vehicle passenger side. The sheriff is in the second truck uniform. I count 12 men. 2 of them have long guns. All right, Rex said. Let them come. He put on the jacket. He went to the gate and stood there with the valley dark around him. Behind him, one by one, the men came up out of the lower pasture and moved to positions in the yard, spreading across it in a loose line, with the ease of people who had done this kind of standing before. Their bikes were parked in a row along the side of the barn, 19 machines with the chrome catching the last starlight. Rex looked at the dark road and thought about all of it, the $30 and the team of horses, the water rights registered in 1947, the letter in his pocket, Nora Hansen's bruised arm, Harlan in the hospital bed, Dot's voice steady at 2 in the morning. He thought about his grandfather's farm in Shasta County and the way the bank had come for it when he was 19, and the way he had had nothing and no one and had walked into a recruiter's office because there was nowhere else to go. He thought about what it would have meant to have someone stand in the driveway of that farm and say, not today, not this place, not these people. The trucks came down the gravel road with their headlights on. They stopped at the gate. Wade Donovan stepped out of the passenger side of the lead truck. He was what Rex had expected, well-built late 50s, expensive clothes worn in a way that was meant to look casual, a man who had traded in projecting authority for so long that he had forgotten how to project anything else. He had the kind of face that had been handsome in youth and had aged into something harder and less pleasant, the face of a man who had gotten what he wanted enough times that the not getting had become genuinely incomprehensible to him. He looked at Rex. He looked at the jacket. His eyes went past Rex to the yard, and what he saw there was not what he had expected. He had expected a single man possibly holding something, possibly posturing. What he saw instead was 19 bikers, most of them large, all of them in their colors, standing in a loose line across the width of the yard, with the patience of men who had nothing to prove and nowhere else to be. Donovan's face did not go white. He was too practiced for that. But something shifted in it. Who the hell are you people, he said. This is private property, Rex said. You have been told that. I am here to talk to Harlan Briggs. Harlan Briggs is in the hospital because your activities gave him a cardiac event. You are talking to me. Donovan looked at Rex with the flat assessment of a man recalculating. You are a trespasser, he said. The Briggs do not know you. The Briggs know me fine, Rex said. You will not make this about me. I will have you arrested for... You will have Sheriff Cobb arrest me, Rex said. The same Sheriff Cobb who has been coordinating with your development company on property acquisitions. The same arrangement that has already been documented and sent to the state attorney's office in Boise, along with bank records linking Cobb's household to your shell company. The state attorney's office confirmed receipt this morning. He paused. The Seattle Times has a copy. So does the Idaho Falls Post-Register. Francis Decker at the Bishop's Hollow paper is holding a story that runs Monday with or without your comment. Donovan stared at him. You are bluffing, he said. From behind Donovan's trucks from the road in the darkness beyond it, a different sound began. Not motorcycles, something else. Rex heard it before Donovan did and watched the moment the man heard it too. Watched his head turn toward the road behind him. They came on foot and in pickup trucks. They had parked on the main road. They came across the fields on foot in the October night. They were perhaps 30 of them, the people of Cutler County, and they came to a stop on the road behind Donovan's 3 trucks. Del Pierce was at the front of the group with his hands in his jacket pockets. Behind him stood men Rex recognized from the diner, the hardware store, the feed supply. The woman from the pharmacy who had looked at Dot with the familiarity of long acquaintance. The doctor from Lewis Fork Hospital who had driven 40 miles on a night when she did not have to. And in the group, her arm in a sling, her face composed and deliberate, Nora Hansen. Donovan looked at the people behind his trucks. He looked at the bikers in the yard. He looked at Rex. This is theater, he said. His voice had lost something, not the authority, something underneath the authority, the certainty that the authority was warranted. No, Rex said. This is your county. These are your neighbors. They know what you have done. They are here because some things need to be said out loud in front of other people in the place where they happened. In the second truck, Sheriff Cobb opened his door and got out. He was not exactly in uniform. He had the clothes on, but the badge was not on his shirt. And Rex noticed that the badge's absence was not an accident. It was a decision already made, an act of distancing already in progress. Wade, Cobb said. Donovan did not look at him. Wade, louder. I heard you, Donovan said. Cobb looked at the faces watching him. The bikers in the yard and the county people on the road. The faces of people who had noticed and said nothing for a long time and were now done saying nothing. He looked at his cousin, whom he had been enabling and enabling and enabling because the money was real, and the ask had seemed manageable until it was not. I am done, Cobb said. Donovan turned to look at him. I am done, Cobb said again. He sounded like a man who had been waiting to say those words for a long time and was saying them now not out of courage, but out of simple exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something heavy long enough that dropping it becomes a relief regardless of what it costs him. He walked away from the trucks. He walked past the county people who made room for him without speaking. He kept walking down the gravel road toward the highway. Rex watched him go. Donovan stood alone at the front of his lead truck. The men he had brought were still in the vehicles, and Rex could see the calculation in them, the moment when several of them decided the calculation did not favor getting out. The 2 men with long guns had set the guns across the back seats and put their hands in visible places. You want to walk away from this county, Rex said. With what is left of your options intact, you will do 3 things. You will make full restitution to the Mosby family, the Hansen family, and the Keller family. Fair market value documented with interest. Your lawyer will hear from Flynn and Associates in Boise this week. The second thing is you will withdraw from any pending action against the Briggs property and sign a document confirming no further interest in these water rights. The third thing is you will do it before the state attorney's office and the FBI field office in Spokane get far enough along in their investigation to make the first 2 things no longer available to you. He paused. Your lawyer will tell you this is the reasonable offer. I am not your lawyer. I am just telling you what is true. Donovan looked at him for a long time. He looked at the people of his county standing behind his trucks. He looked at the bikers standing across the yard in the dark, with the patience of men who had nothing to prove, and had not moved, and had not spoken, and had let their presence say everything that needed to be said. He looked at Rex Carver, who looked back at him with the level patience of a man who had nothing in particular to be afraid of and had not had anything to be afraid of for a very long time. "Get in the truck," Donovan said to his driver. His voice had the flat sound of a man who has arrived at the end of something. He got in the passenger side, the door closed. The trucks turned around in the gravel, slowly without drama, and they drove back down the road toward the highway, and the people of Cutler County watched them go, and the bikers watched them go, and Rex stood at the gate and watched the dust settle in the retreating headlight beams until the lights were gone and the road was dark and the only sound left was the creek coming down from the North Hills, running steady and cold and indifferent to all of it. Del Pierce walked up and stood beside him at the gate. They looked at the dark road together. "All right," Del said. "All right," Rex said. The people went home. The bikers came back from their positions and stood in the yard, and someone started a fire in the stone ring down in the lower pasture, and the night moved into the territory of aftermath, which always felt larger and quieter than the thing it came after. Slade appeared at Rex's shoulder. "You good?" Slade said. "I am good." "That is twice you have said that tonight." Both times were true. Slade looked at the house. The kitchen light was on. Through the window, Rex could see Dot moving, and beyond her at the table, Harlan's familiar silhouette. He had not stayed inside exactly. He had come to the window. He had watched from there because staying inside completely would have required a kind of surrender that was not in his nature, and all of them had understood that without discussing it. "You are staying," Slade said. "Not a question." "Yes." Slade put his hand on Rex's shoulder once briefly. "Good," he said, and went back to the fire. Nora Hanson was the last of the county people to leave. She came to the gate before she went and stood beside Rex, and they looked at the road together. "It is not over," she said. "The legal part, it will take months." "I know. Donovan has good lawyers. Flynn is better, and the documentation is solid. And there is a journalist at the Seattle Times who has been waiting for a story like this for 3 years." She nodded. She looked at the road. "I should have stood up a year ago when he first came to me, when I still had the land." Rex looked at her. "You were alone," he said, "and you were afraid. That is not failure. That is being human." "I should have, Nora." He said it gently. "The land is still there. It is still the Hanson land to everyone who knows this county. A deed is a piece of paper. What happened on that land, what your family made of it, what it meant, that does not transfer with the title." She looked at him. "Flynn says the acquisition method may be legally challengeable. If the coercion can be proven, which it can, the original sale may not hold. He said it is worth pursuing. He is pursuing it." She was quiet for a moment. The county people's trucks were gone now, their taillights disappearing around the Cottonwood Bend. "What are you?" she said. Not the way people said it about his club. The other way. The way people said it when they had witnessed something they did not have a category for. "Just a man who stopped," Rex said. She looked at him a moment longer. Then she nodded and walked to her truck and drove away. Rex went back to the fire where Slade was sitting. "She is tough," Slade said. "She is. The old couple is tougher." "Yes." Slade poked at the fire. Sparks rose and drifted sideways in the October air. "You know this is not fully done," he said. "Donovan will lawyer up. Cobb will make a deal. The legal process will grind." "I know. You are still staying." "Yes." Slade looked at the fire. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it without arguing." Rex looked at him. "When your mother died, you left. You rode north without telling anyone where you were going or when you would be back. You went off grid. I understood it. Grief needs room. But I was worried." He paused. "I am not a man who worries easily. You know that." "I know that. You look like a man who might not find his way back. The kind of drift I have seen before, where someone rides away from something and does not stop because the not stopping is the point, because the stopping would require confronting what they are riding away from." He looked at Rex. "You know how that story usually ends." Rex was quiet. "I am glad you stopped here," Slade said. "I am glad the gate was broken and the barn had words on it and a woman pointed a shotgun at you. I am glad you had a reason to stop." Rex looked at the fire. "Me too," he said. They sat in silence for a while. The fire settled. The creek ran its cold, indifferent course from the North Hills to wherever it went after the valley. "The club will always be there," Slade said. "When you are ready, if you want to come back." "I know. But if you find you are meant to be here, that is all right too. Some men are meant to ride. Some men are meant to stay. And sometimes the same man is meant to ride for a long time and then stay. That is not a failure." Rex looked at the farm. The old house with its porch and its kitchen light, the barn, the south pasture, the creek line dark against the lighter sky. No, he said, it is not a failure. He put more wood on the fire. The bikers stayed 2 more days. They ate Dot's biscuits and her stew and her cornbread, and they helped with the wood pile and repaired a section of fence on the north pasture, and they were careful and considerate, and most of them called her ma'am with a tone that was entirely genuine. On the morning they left, Dot came out to the yard with a box of food she had packed, sandwiches and cookies wrapped in wax paper, which she distributed to each man individually, and which each man received with the awkward gratitude of someone who is not accustomed to being cared for in this particular way. Slade was last. He took his sandwich from Dot and looked at her. Thank you, she said, for what you did for him. Not for what you did here, for what you did for him, which was a different and more particular thing. Slade nodded. He did not say anything. He put the sandwich in his jacket pocket. He walked to Rex and stood with him by the gate. I will be in touch, Slade said. I will be here. Slade looked at the farm, the hills, the creek line, the old house with its weathered paint and its wraparound porch and its kitchen light always on. Yeah, he said. He got on his bike. He looked at Rex one more time. Then he kicked the engine to life and rolled down the gravel road, and one by one the others followed, and the sound of 19 engines moved through the cottonwood stand and out onto the county road and faded south into the distance. The dust settled. The creek ran. Rex stood at the gate for a while, then he walked to the barn. He climbed to the loft and got the ammo box. He carried it to the house. He knocked on the kitchen door frame and came in. Harlan was at the table. Dot was at the counter. They both looked at him. He set the ammo box on the table in front of Harlan. Your father put this in the barn wall in 1983, Rex said. Behind the water trough housing. I found it when I was fixing the fitting. He paused. I think he meant for you to find it, or whoever came after you. Harlan looked at the box. He looked at the scratched letters on the lid. He put his hand on it. He opened it. He looked at the land patent first. He unfolded it carefully, his old hands very still and deliberate. He read it without speaking. Then he looked at the map. He studied the red ink annotations, his father's handwriting on the water rights, the registration numbers. Then he took out the letter and unfolded it. Rex stood by the counter and looked out the window at the yard. He could see the ruts where the 19 bikes had sat. He could see the fire ring in the lower pasture, the ash is cold now. He could see patience in the south pasture grazing on the new grass at the field's edge. Behind him, nothing, no sound from the table. He waited. After a long while, he heard Harlan set the letter down. He turned. Harlan was sitting very straight in his chair. His eyes were bright in the way of eyes that have not let themselves cry and are not going to. Dot had come to stand behind him. Her hand was on his shoulder. He thought ahead, Harlan said. He always thought ahead. Yes, Rex said. Harlan looked at the letter. He looked at Rex. For whoever stays, he said. Yes, Rex said. The room was quiet. The kitchen clock. The sound of the creek from the north window, faint and continuous. Harlan reached into the brass pocket of his shirt and took out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table beside the letter. Rex saw that it was a legal form typed with blank signature lines. Flynn called this morning, Harlan said. He is a fast worker. He is. He said the state attorney's office is moving. He said Donovan's lawyers contacted him at 8 this morning. He paused. He said the restitution offer is real. The Mosby family, the Hanson family, the Kellers. Yes. And Donovan is withdrawing from any interest in our property. Signed and delivered, Flynn said. Harlan nodded. He looked at the form on the table. This is the deed amendment. Flynn prepared it. He looked at Rex. Dot and I talked last night. We want your name on this deed. Rex looked at the form. You do not have to do that, he said. We know we do not have to, Dot said. She was still standing behind Harlan, her hand on his shoulder. We want to. I have been here 6 weeks, Rex said. My grandfather was here 6 months before he owned anything, Harlan said. And he owned it because he put himself between this land and the people who wanted to take it, which is what you did. He looked at the form and then at Rex. My father left a letter for whoever stays. You stayed. He pushed the form across the table. The land knows it. The papers just say what the land already said. Rex looked at the form. He looked at the table at the land patent and the water rights map and the letter from a man who had been dead for decades but had thought ahead far enough to reach into this kitchen on this October evening and say what needed to be said to whoever needed to hear it. He pulled the form toward him and signed it. Harlan reached across the table and put his hand over Rex's for a long moment without speaking. Then he put his glasses on and picked up his coffee cup. "That fence on the north pasture," he said, "the one your friends fixed. I think the third post from the left is still loose." Rex looked at him. "You might want to check that today," Harlan said, "before the ground freezes." Rex looked at Dot. She was looking at Harlan with an expression that contained everything she had said to him in 50 years of mornings at this table, and everything she would say to him in the mornings that remained, all of it compressed into a look that lasted a second and needed no translation. Rex stood up. He put on his jacket. He went out to the barn and got the post hole digger and the tamping bar and the bag of gravel he had put there last week because he had noticed the post was loose and had been meaning to get to it. He walked out across the north pasture in the October morning, his boots wet with dew, the creek sound in his ears, the hills dark against the pale sky to the north. He found the post, third from the left, as Harlan had said. He set down the tools. He put his hands around the post and felt it, the give in it, the slight lean. That meant the ground had released it just enough to let the wind work on it. He picked up the post hole digger and went to work. The weeks that followed moved at the rhythm of the farm, which was a slower rhythm than most things Rex had lived by, and he adjusted to it the way you adjust to a new climate, gradually without noticing the adjustment was happening. Until one morning you realize you are not adjusting anymore, you have simply arrived. November came in cold. The hayfield went brown and frost brittle. The creek ran higher as the rain came down from the north gray days that smelled of wet stone and pine, the sky low and close. Rex learned the farm's November character the way he had been learning its other characters, by being present in it, by watching what Harlan watched and responding to what required response. The tractor in the equipment shed took 3 days. He ordered parts from a supplier in Boise, drove to pick them up, spent a day and a half on the engine with his hands cold and a drop light because the shed's overhead bulb was not enough. When the tractor turned over and ran, Harlan came out of the house despite the rain and stood in the shed doorway and listened to it for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, "She sounds better than she did in 2019, which was for Harlan an extraordinary compliment. Dot had a routine that Rex came to understand without being told about it. She rose at 6 and was in the kitchen by 6:15, and the coffee was made by 6:30, and if Rex was not at the table by 6:45, she would come to the barn door and say his name not loudly, just enough. He adjusted his own rising to match. He was at the table by 6:40, which she registered with quiet satisfaction and never commented on. They ate breakfast together, the three of them, every morning. Rex came to understand this was important. Not the food, though Dot's cooking was serious and consistent. The gathering. The 3 chairs at the table, the routine of it, the way a day that began with all of them in the same room felt different from a day that did not. Harlan talked at breakfast. He talked about what he planned to do that day, which was a combination of things he actually could do and things he intended to do and would not be able to. And both of them knew it, and neither of them mentioned it. Rex listened and noted the things that would need to be handled and handled them in the afternoon, which was when Harlan rested, which was something the doctor had required and which Harlan complied with under mild protest. Dot was quieter in the mornings. She came to life in the afternoons when she would be doing serious cooking, or sitting on the south porch with tea and a book, or on the phone with one of the women from the Lutheran church who had been her closest friends for 30 years. Rex was invisible to those afternoon phone calls, which was as it should be, but sometimes he heard pieces of them through the window while he was working in the yard, and what he heard was a woman who was funnier than her daily self, who laughed more freely, who talked about things with a sharpness and intelligence that the business of managing Harlan and managing the farm and managing her own worry about both did not always leave room for. He was glad she had that. He was glad she had women who knew her. Flynn called on a Thursday in November. The state attorney's office had issued subpoenas. Donovan's company had produced documents, some of them, and the investigators believed there were more being withheld. Cobb had accepted a plea agreement, resigned from the sheriff's office, and was cooperating in exchange for reduced charges. His cooperation included testimony about the specific conversations between himself and Donovan regarding the Briggs property and the water rights. He knew about the water rights from the beginning, Flynn said. That is what Cobb's testimony establishes. Donovan knew exactly what he was after and structured the whole development project as a vehicle to get to the water rights while making it look like a straightforward real estate play. The Mosby family, Rex said, the Hanson family, the Kellers, The coercion case is strong. I think we get the sales unwound. It will take time, but I think we get there. What about Nora Hansen's property? A pause. That one is more complicated. She signed willingly legally. The coercion was implicit, the pattern of what happened to the others, the atmosphere of threat. But she was not directly threatened in a documentable way until after the sale. We are arguing constructive coercion. It is a harder case to make. Make it, Rex said. I intend to, Flynn said. Rex called Nora that evening. He told her what Flynn had said. She was quiet for a moment on her end of the line. Harder case, she said, but a case. Yes, that is more than I had last week. Yes, he heard her breathe. I've been thinking about what you said, that the land is still the Hansen land to everyone who knows this county. It is true. I walked the fence line yesterday, my fence line, or the line where my fence used to be. Donovan's people took it down. A pause. The land is the same. The ground does not know who signed what. The creek runs through it the same way it ran through my grandmother's garden. She paused again. I had forgotten that somehow. I had forgotten that the land itself does not care about the paperwork. No, Rex said. It does not. Thank you, she said, for reminding me. He called Garcia. Garcia answered on the second ring. His voice was guarded at first, the voice of a man prepared to be judged. Rex told him he understood why he had sat out. He told him he respected it. He told him that making the right call when it costs you something is harder than making it when it is free, and that he did not take it for granted. Garcia was quiet for a moment. Then he said, How is the old couple? Good, getting better. And you? Good, getting better. Garcia laughed, surprised out of him. Brother, he said. Brother, Rex said. December came and brought snow. And the specific silence of a farm under snow, which was the deepest silence Rex had ever experienced, deeper than desert silence, deeper than the silence of open water on a calm day. The snow muffled everything except the creek, which ran on regardless, because the creek had been running through winters longer than anyone had been keeping track, and it did not stop for weather. He shoveled the porch every morning before sunrise. He kept the wood box full. He fed Patience in the dark with a lantern hung from the barn post and listened to her contented sounds and thought about nothing in particular. And thinking about nothing in particular was a thing he had not been able to do for a very long time. He drove Harlan and Dot to the Lutheran church for the Christmas service. He sat in the truck in the parking lot and listened to the singing through the window. He had left cracked and did not feel outside it exactly. He felt adjacent to it, which was fine. Dot brought him pie from the church social afterward, warm wrapped in a paper napkin carried through the cold night air. He ate it in the truck with the window still cracked and the sound of the congregation coming out of the church behind him. Voices and laughter and boots on frozen steps. People he had come to know by sight over the months, people who had stood on a gravel road one October night when it mattered. It was Christmas Eve. The pie was pecan, which was not his favorite, but Dot had given it to him, and so it was. In February, a letter came from Flynn's office. Rex brought it in from the mailbox and set it on the kitchen table without opening it. That evening after supper, he set it in front of Harlan. Harlan put on his glasses. He opened it. He read it. He set it down and took off his glasses and set them beside the letter. The Mosby family, he said, the Kellers. Flynn says it is going through. The land. He looked at Dot. They are getting it back. Dot sat very still. Nora, Rex said, pending. But Flynn says pending in a way that he sounds confident about. Rex picked up his coffee cup. He looked at the window, at the dark yard, at the snow on the pasture, and the dark line of the creek. My father thought ahead, Harlan said. Yes. He wrote a letter for whoever came after. He made a map. He registered water rights in 1947 because he understood what they were. He paused. He built this farm to last past him, past me, past anyone who could be predicted. He looked at Rex. He did not know you were coming. He could not have known. But he built for someone like you. Rex did not say anything. You stayed, Harlan said. That is what the letter said, whoever stays. I stayed, Rex said. Harlan picked up the letter. He folded it carefully and set it by his plate. He picked up his coffee. The north fence, he said. The section your friends fixed in October. I was out there yesterday, third post from the left. Rex looked at him. Still solid, Harlan said. You said it right. Rex looked at his coffee. I know, he said. They sat at the table, the three of them, in the kitchen of the farmhouse that had stood since 1931 in the valley where the creek ran cold from the North Hills year-round, in the county that was slowly and perfectly through the grinding machinery of law and consequence, beginning to come back to something like what it had been before the trouble started. Outside the window, the February stars were hard and clear. The farm held. He drove to Bishop's Hollow on a Tuesday in March with nothing specific to do there, which was itself a new thing, the ability to go somewhere without a task attached to the going. He bought coffee at the diner and read the weekly paper, which had run Francis Decker's story in January and a follow-up in February. The state attorney's case against Donovan had generated 3 more pieces after that, picked up by the Idaho Falls paper and then by the Seattle Times. Frances had gotten what she called the news peg she had been waiting for, and she had used it the way a careful journalist uses a door that finally opens methodically and without waste. Rex read the paper at the counter and drank his coffee, and the woman who poured it looked at him now the way she looked at everyone who was a regular, with the comfortable recognition of someone you have stopped needing to read because you already know them. He paid. He walked out. On the sidewalk, Del Pierce was locking up the hardware store for his lunch break. He saw Rex and raised a hand. Rex raised his hand back. That was the entire exchange, and it contained more than a longer conversation would have. He drove back to the farm. The creek was running high with the March snowmelt, louder than it had been all winter, filling the valley with its cold, continuous voice. Rex stopped the truck at the north gate and got out and stood at the timber crossing and looked at the water. Clear over gray stone, moving fast, carrying the melt from the dark hills. His grandfather had said once, standing at the edge of the irrigation ditch on the Shasta County farm, that a man who understood water understood everything important about land. Rex had been 12 years old. He had not understood what it meant at the time. He thought he understood it now, standing at the north gate of a farm that had his name on the deed, listening to water, that 2 different men across 2 different generations had been careful enough to put in writing. He got back in the truck. He drove back to the house. Dot was on the south porch with her tea, which was her afternoon thing, the half hour she gave herself before she started supper. She looked up when Rex came around the corner. "Harlan is resting," she said. "He actually rested today without arguing about it." "Good day," Rex said. "Good day." She looked at her cup. "The porch railing on the east side is loose. 3rd post." Rex looked at the railing. He was not surprised. There was always something on a farm. There was always a 3rd post. "I will get it tomorrow," he said. She nodded. She picked up her book. He went into the barn. He climbed to the loft. He sat on the sleeping bag with the ammo box beside him, which was where he kept it and where he expected he would always keep it, because the box had earned its place in this barn the same way everything earned its place in a working life, by being present when presence mattered. He picked up his phone. He had a message from Slade sent that afternoon, a photograph with no text attached. It was taken from the Oakland clubhouse out the back window toward the hills. One of those California winter afternoons where the light comes in low and gold, and everything it touches goes briefly luminous. The parking lot, the bikes lined up, the hills beyond dark against a pale sky. Rex looked at it for a while. He typed back, "Looks good." He set the phone down. He lay back on the sleeping bag and looked at the barn ceiling, at the rafters Harlan's grandfather had cut from the timber on the North Hill and set in place in 1931, timber that had held for nearly a century and showed no sign of stopping. He listened to Patience in her stall below. He listened to the creek, louder today, running hard with the melt filling the valley with the sound of water that had been running through winters longer than anyone had been keeping count of it. He thought about the letter in the box beside him. The last line of it, "I trust that you are here because the farm chose you the same way the farm chose me, which was by being something I could not walk away from." He had ridden 600 miles north without a destination. He had stopped at a gate because it was broken and the barn behind it had a word on it, and because he was a man who knew what that kind of situation built toward when no one stopped it. He had stayed because there was work to do, and the work was real. And then there had been more reasons, and then more still. And now the farm had his name on its deed, and the letter was in a box beside his sleeping bag, and the creek ran through the north pasture carrying snowmelt from the hills, and the tractor ran, and the fence posts were set true. He turned onto his side. Through the open hayloft door, he could see the last of the afternoon light on the south pasture, the grass coming back green now at the edges where the snowmelt ran, the color of things returning to themselves after the long cold. Patience made a sound, below her contented feed time sound, the sound of an animal in the right place at the right time, being exactly what it was meant to be. Rex Carver closed his eyes. He woke at 4:30 the next morning. Old habit, older than the club, older than in the Marines, going back to a farm in Shasta County, where a man rose before the light and worked until the light was gone and understood that the work and the rising were the same thing, that they were not separate from each other. He got up. He put on his boots. He went down the ladder and out into the yard, and the air was sharp and clean, and the stars were still out hard, in particular the way stars are when the air is cold enough that nothing blurs them. The porch light was on. It was always on. He went to the wood pile. He split enough for 2 days. He stacked it under the eave out of the weather. He filled the box on the back porch to the lid. He went to the barn and fed Patience in the dark and checked her water and made sure the hay was fresh in the rack. He washed his hands at the yard pump. The water was cold, almost painfully, so the March cold not yet out of the ground. He went inside. He made the coffee. He sat at the table and waited. At 6:15, the stairs creaked, the particular creak of the third step from the bottom that had been creaking since before Harlan was born, and that no one had ever fixed, because some things in a house you stop meaning to fix and start meaning to hear. At 6:20, Dot came through the kitchen door, saw the coffee on the stove, saw Rex at the table, and sat down across from him. She wrapped her hands around her cup. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," Rex said. Outside the window, the first light was beginning at the east edge of the pasture, that thin gray becoming pale gold, the frost on the grass catching it and holding it briefly. The farm spread out around him in the early light, the hayfield in the south pasture, and the old house with its wraparound porch and its kitchen window, where two people were sitting with coffee in the morning, the way two people sit when they have agreed without discussing it that this is how mornings work now. Beyond the house, the barn stood red against the pale sky. On its south wall, the word "cell" was still there, faded now by winter in the rain that had come and gone. Harlan had not said to paint it over yet. Rex had not asked. The word was part of the record of what had happened here, and the record was not finished yet, and when it was finished, they would paint over it together, and the barn would be just a barn again, which was what it had always been and always would be. The creek ran from the north hills through the pasture in its channel of mossy stone. It ran as it had run through the winter and through every winter before that, carrying the melt of the high country down through the valley to wherever it went after, indifferent to deeds and disputes and the slow grinding of law and consequence running, because it had always run, and because the hills kept making snow, and the snow kept melting, and the water kept going where water goes. The registration numbers for the water rights were in a box in the barn loft, annotated in red ink by a hand that had been dead for 40 years, preserved in oilcloth in a wall for 4 decades against the need of someone who had not yet arrived. Rex Carver had arrived. He sat in the kitchen of the farmhouse that had stood since 1931 and drank his coffee and waited for the light to come. Across the table, Dot turned the page of a book she had picked up from the counter. The clock on the wall ticked. The porch light was on, outside its glow smaller now that the day was coming, but still they're still doing what it did. The farm held. The creek ran. The morning came the way morning comes to a farm that has been there long enough to know morning slowly without drama offering itself to whoever was awake to receive it. Rex set down his cup. He stood up. He put on his jacket. He went to the door. "Third post on the east railing," Dot said without looking up from her book. "Yes, ma'am," Rex said. He went out. The air was cold and smelled of wet stone and pine and the beginning of spring. The hawk was at its post on the north fence line, the one that was always there, making its slow circles and its patient judgments over the field. Rex walked to the equipment shed. He got the tools. He came back to the porch. He put his hand on the railing post. Third from the east end, he felt the give in it, the slight instability that said the ground had let it loose just enough for the wind to work on it over time. He set the tools down. He went to the barn for the post hole digger and the bag of gravel and the tamping bar. He came back. He began. The post came free of the ground with the second pole. He set it aside, dug deeper, packed fresh gravel into the base at the post plumb, with the level he had brought from the shed, tamped it firm. He worked without hurrying. He worked the way his grandfather had worked, which was the way the work itself asked to be done, at the pace of the material and the ground and the light. When it was done, he put both hands on the post and pressed. It did not move. He gathered the tools and carried them back to the shed and hung them in their places. Then he went to the south pasture and checked on Patience. The cow turned her head when he came through the gate and looked at him with her patient dark eye and went back to grazing. Rex stood and watched her for a while. He had grown up around cattle. He knew their rhythms. Patience was a contented animal, well-fed, well-watered, living out her older years on ground that suited her. He leaned on the fence rail and looked out across the south pasture to the hills. The hills were still dark this time of morning, the sun not yet high enough to reach them, and in the dark you could not see the timber on the upper slopes, the same timber Harlan's grandfather had cut for the first shelter in that first winter. It was still there, second growth now, probably third, but still there. He walked back to the house. Harlan was at the kitchen table when Rex came in, which was not unusual, but there was something different about the way he was sitting. A stillness that went beyond the ordinary stillness of a man at his morning coffee. He had the land patent from the ammo box on the table in front of him. He had it unfolded and spread flat, and he was reading it with his glasses on, which he had been doing with some regularity since the box had come into the house. Going back to the documents. The way you go back to a letter from someone you have lost, not because there is new information in it, but because the reading of it is its own act, its own small ceremony. Rex poured himself a cup from the stove and sat down. "You know what I remember," Harlan said. He was not looking at Rex. He was looking at the patent. "What do you remember?" Rex said. "My father used to take me out to the north fence line when I was small, 6, 7 years old. He would show me where the creek came down from the hills, and he would say, 'See where the water starts. That is the beginning of everything on this ground.'" I did not understand what he meant at the time. I thought he was just talking about the creek. Rex drank his coffee. "He was talking about all of it," Harlan said. "He was talking about the registration in Boise and the numbers on the map and everything that was in that box." He paused. "He could not tell me directly because I was 6 years old, and it would not have meant anything to me at 6. So he showed me the water. He said, 'See where the water starts,' and he trusted that I would figure out the rest of it eventually." "You figured it out eventually," Rex said. "I had help," Harlan said. He folded the patent. He looked at Rex. "You found the box." "It was in the wall." "It was in the wall for 40 years, and nobody found it," Harlan said. Until you went looking for a busted water fitting." He folded his hands over the patent. "My father put that box there for whoever would come. He did not know it would take 40 years. He did not know who it would be." He paused. "But it was you." Rex looked at his cup. "I have been thinking about that," Harlan said. "About how things work out. About the way a chain of events runs that you could not have planned if you had tried. You left at Oakland because your mother died. You rode north because riding was what you had. You came down a county road you had never been on because something about it read wrong to you. You stopped at a gate because the gate was broken, and you were the kind of man who notices broken gates." He paused. "You were in the barn fixing a water fitting, and you found something that had been waiting 40 years to be found." "Yes," Rex said. "My father did not know any of that would happen," Harlan said. "He put the box in the wall and trusted that whoever was meant to find it would find it. That is a kind of faith I have been thinking about." He looked at the patent on the table. "I am not a particularly religious man, never have been, but I believe my father had a kind of faith in the land that the land would know what it needed and would work to get it, that it would draw toward itself the things it required." He was quiet for a moment. "I think the land drew you here." Rex looked at his hands. He looked at the window at the morning light coming across the pasture. He thought about the gate and the gravel road and the hawk on the fence post and the flat eyes of Sheriff Cobb on a 2-lane road 4 miles from nowhere. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe a broken gate is just a broken gate and I happen to stop." "Maybe both things are true," Harlan said. Rex looked at him. "Maybe a broken gate is just a broken gate," Harlan said. "And maybe that is exactly how the land does it." Rex was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee cup and drank and said nothing more, because there was nothing more that needed saying. And they sat there together in the kitchen with the morning coming through the window and the clock on the wall ticking and the creek running faintly from the north pasture, running as it had always run, indifferent and continuous and exactly what everything here depended on. In April, the state attorney's office announced formal charges against Wade Donovan. The charges were substantial: fraud, extortion, conspiracy, corruption of a public official. Flynn called to give Rex the rundown, and Rex listened and said thank you, and hung up and went back to repairing the baler in the equipment shed, because the baler was going to be needed in July, and July was not as far away as it seemed, and the shed was not going to heat itself, and the part he had ordered from Missoula had arrived 2 days ago and was sitting in its box waiting. He got the baler running on a Wednesday afternoon. He came in for supper with grease on his hands, in his jacket, and something that was not quite a smile on his face, not the performed kind, just the thing that happens to a face when a difficult piece of work has gone right. Dot looked at him when he came through the door. "Baylor," she said. "Baylor," he said. She put another plate on the table. In May, Nora Hansen's case had a development. Flynn called with it in the early evening when Rex was on the south porch after supper, the night warm enough for the first time to sit outside after dark. The court had agreed to hear the constructive coercion argument. It was not a ruling, Flynn said. It was a door opening, but it was a door that had been closed, and now it was not. "What does that mean for her timeline?" Rex asked. 18 months, 2 years to a full resolution. Maybe less if Donovan's legal team continues to implode, which seems likely given the pressure they are under. "She will want to hear it from you directly," Rex said. "She should hear it from you." "I will call her," Flynn said. Rex sat on the south porch after the call and looked at the May evening, the pasture going dark, the hills still lit at the tops by the last of the sun. A barn swallow made passes over the hayfield, catching insects in the warm air. The creek made its sound from the north fence line, the sound it always made, which was the sound of continuity itself, the sound of something that had no interest in stopping. He thought about Nora Hansen walking the fence line of her own sold land and remembering that the land itself did not care about the paperwork. He thought about the Mosby family and their trailer park in Idaho, and the phone call they had gotten from a lawyer they did not know, and the check that had come after that, and the daughter they would now be able to live near. He thought about the Keller family and the Mosbys and the county that had stood on a gravel road one October night and been counted. He thought about Harlan's grandfather breaking ground in November with $30 and a pregnant wife. He thought about a box in a barn wall dated April 1983, addressed to whoever would come. He thought, "I am the one who came." He sat on the porch until the stars came out, and when they were fully out, he went inside and the porch light was on when he did, because it was always on, and he did not think about this anymore as a thing that required noticing, which meant it had become simply part of what this place was. He went upstairs. He washed his face. He looked in the mirror at a 53-year-old man with grease he had not entirely gotten off his left wrist, and 2 days of beard and eyes that looked, he thought, less like the eyes he had brought north from Fresno in March than like some other pair of eyes that had found their focal length. He went to bed. He slept without dreaming. At 4:30, the alarm did not go off because he did not use an alarm. He woke on his own, as he always woke the body, knowing what the body knew. He put on his boots. He went downstairs. He made the coffee. He went out to the barn and fed patients and checked the water and came back. He split wood in the blue dark before the sun came, the axe falling clean through the cold air, the sound of it carrying across the yard and into the quiet fields. He was stacking the wood under the eave when he heard the stairs creak. The third step from the bottom. He came inside. Dot was at the counter with her cup. She turned when he came in. She looked at him the way she always looked at him in the morning and now, which was to say she looked at him the way you look at someone who is supposed to be there, which is to say she hardly looked at him at all because he was simply there, which was what there was. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," and he said. He poured his coffee. He sat at the table. He looked out the window at the yard, at the barn, at the south pasture, where Patience was a dark shape in the early gray. He looked at the hills above the north fence line, still dark, still holding their timber, still sending their water down. The clock ticked on the wall. The creek ran. The morning came. Rex Carver sat in the kitchen of the Briggs farm, which had his name on the deed now, and drank his coffee and waited for whatever the day needed from him. There would be something. There was always something. That was the nature of the work, and the nature of the land, and the nature of staying, which was not a thing you did once, but a thing you kept doing every morning, every day, for as long as the land had need of you and you had need of it. He was staying. The farm held. June came slow and warm to the valley. The hayfield greened up fully, and Harlan walked out to look at it on a Tuesday morning, walking without the cane for the first time since winter, or rather walking with the cane but leaning on it less the hip, having decided at some point in the spring warmth to cooperate to a greater degree than it had been. He stood at the edge of the field and looked at the stand and said nothing. Rex stood beside him and also said nothing. They were two men looking at a hayfield that was doing what a hayfield was supposed to do, and there was not much to add to that. They cut in July. Rex ran the tractor. Harlan rode along for the first pass, sitting on the fender with one hand on the roll bar, watching the cutter work through the grass with an expression Rex had seen on his face before, the expression of a man confirming something he had believed but wanted to see confirmed. Dot brought lunch out to the field at noon in a basket, cold chicken and biscuits, and 2 thermoses of iced tea, and they sat in the cut grass in the shade of the equipment shed and ate. And Harlan told a story about the summer of 1978 that Rex had not heard before. And that made Dot laugh in the way she laughed on her afternoon phone calls, fully and without editing herself. In August, Flynn sent a letter. The Mosby family had moved back to Cutler County. Not to the original land, the resolution of that was still moving through the courts, but to a house in Bishop's Hollow in town, where Margaret Mosby's daughter and grandchildren also lived. Flynn wrote that Margaret Mosby had called his office to say thank you and had cried on the phone, which Flynn noted not to make a point of it, but because it had happened and he thought Rex should know. Rex read the letter at the kitchen table. He folded it and set it beside Harlan's coffee cup without comment. Harlan read it at breakfast the next morning and also folded it without comment. He got up and put it on the small shelf above the counter where Dot kept the important things: the utility account, the property tax notice, the discharge papers from the hospital in October. Rex watched him put it there. He understood why it went there. Some things belonged in the record of what had happened, and the record was the farm, and the farm was the shelf above the counter, and the box in the barn loft, and the land patent from 1931, and the letter that ended, "Take care of it," and the deed with 3 names on it, and the hayfield in July, and the creek running through, everything running as it had always run, beginning in the high country, where the snow came from, and ending wherever water ends up when it has done what it came to do. Rex Carver did not think about leaving. He thought about the north fence timber crossing that needed new planking before another winter. He thought about the section of the hay barn roof above the west loft that had softened and would not make it another year without attention. He thought about Patience, who was old and would not be replaced when she was gone, but whose stall he would keep clean regardless, because the stall was part of the barn, and the barn was part of the farm, and the farm was his responsibility. He was a man who understood responsibility. He went to work.